Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I am Jeff Nowak. This is a live episode of Inside Black and Gold. Did anything happen today? Is there anything worth talking about? It's funny. After last episode, I was kind of thinking to myself, man, Saints aren't going to put out an injury report until Thursday. There's not really going to be a ton of news to talk about. So what are we going to talk about? What's there possibly going to be to talk about on Wednesday? Ahead of what is the official start of the week on Thursday. The Saints are playing on Monday night, so their first practice of the week isn't really until Thursday. They got out on Wednesday. Today, I'm recording this for a light walkthrough, right? But that's not really a practice day. So I was like, what are we going to talk about? Well, wouldn't you know it? Yesterday, I don't even know what time, around midday, Davante Adams makes it clear that I want to get traded. I would prefer to play somewhere else. So there we go. There's our topic. We're going to talk a lot about Davante Adams. We're going to talk about whether it makes sense, how the Saints could pull this kind of trade off, whether it would make sense to pull this kind of trade off, how, if they did, it could impact the offense. All of that good stuff. We're going to dive in this first segment. Second segment, we're going to hear a interview with Keith Williams. He was on WWL this week, the Saints wide receivers coach, which good timing because Keith Williams' connection to Davante Adams is obviously a big factor in this, along with Derek Carr's connection to Davante Adams. So we'll dive into both those connections, and we'll hear from Keith Williams in the second segment. Final segment is going to be a mailbag. So if you have questions, comments, throw them in the chat. We will get to as many as possible. I have a feeling it's also going to be about Davante Adams, but any other questions y'all have, throw them in there. We will get into as many as possible in the final segment. So let's do that. But let's return to the subject at hand, and it is Davante Adams. Who says no? That's a good question. The Saints are obviously not a team that you would look at and say, yeah, that is a group that should be head over heels in love with a receiver that makes $34 million a year that would suddenly change the offense after 4 weeks, 2 wins, 2 losses. You are firmly in the middle of the pack. Doesn't exactly scream one player away. But there's got to be a method to this. The Saints have looked at acquiring a Davante Adams in the past. They talked about it when they signed Derek Carr. Right back then, you were in a situation where it was like, hey, maybe we can go get Davante Adams. Didn't work out. The Raiders were committed to Davante Adams. And, you can understand why. You look at the production of this guy, and it's been very, very consistent. Right? He's a guy who's had 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. It would be 7 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, if not for, it would be 6 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, if not for a 997-yard season way back when. So, this is a guy who's basically on autopilot for 1,000 yards. You look at even the 15 games he and Derek Carr played together, he was over 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns. So this is a guy that Derek Carr understands how to use, played with at Fresno State, and would immediately add teeth to this offense in a way that you probably need it, right? This is a bigger guy. He's more of a contested catch player than the Saints have. I was asked by someone, it's like, hey, do you think if they had Davante Adams, it would have won them either the last 2 games? Close losses to the Eagles, a close loss to the Falcons. And my answer was 50-50, right? Like, I don't think that Davante would have made a difference against the Eagles. I think that you were kind of where you were in that game, regardless of whether you had another weapon there. But in the Falcons game, you will not convince me that if you're throwing an end zone fade, if they're sending a zero blitz and you're throwing an end zone fade to a Davante Adams instead of a Rashid Shaheed, that Davante doesn't have a much better chance to come down with that ball. And I think if you scored on that initial touchdown drive, the failed 4th down touchdown drive, you have a better chance of winning that game, because even if the Falcons go and drive for a field goal, you probably get the ball back. You understand what I'm saying? So I do think that there is a level to this where, hey, will this offense improve? Yes. But for me, and I put out a thread kind of on this vein, but for me, there's 3 questions you ask whenever you're considering making a trade like this. One, the first one, the most important one, can you do it? Not should you, not will you. Can you do it? Can the Saints, a team that is hysterically over the salary cap every year to a point that number doesn't even matter, right? But a team that is almost always going to be kind of pulling every lever it can to get under the salary cap prior to the next season, can that team take on a Davante Adams contract? And the answer, while complicated, is yes. You can do it. You can figure out a way to either have the Raiders take on some of that salary, which would probably require you to send them an extra or a higher draft compensation, which we'll get into in a minute here. You could restructure a player like Alvin Kamara. You could extend Davante and add some void years to the end. There are ways, if the Saints want to get this done, that they could get this done, right? So that answer is yes. The second question is, should you do it / will it actually improve the team? We'll unpack the second part of that right now, which is, I don't need to sit here and explain to you who Davante Adams is. We all know who Davante Adams is. He will improve this team. How much? I don't know, but there's no world where you look at it and you say, we are going to add a Davante Adams and it will not give us a better chance for success on offense. So to answer that question, yes, it will improve your team. And the third is, what will it cost you? And I'm talking both financially and locker room wise, right? Like, are you looking at a scenario where there's resentment, right? And to me, that's the biggest question. And we'll dive into a few other elements of this as we go forward. But I think people underestimate the kind of personal toll it takes to A, trade a player, and B, trade for a player and try to incorporate them in an already established locker room midstream. And you're talking about a group of guys that has been there the whole time. You're talking about a guy like Chris Olave, who's finally in that wide receiver one role, is playing well, and you're then supplanting him with a veteran player and saying, yeah, we like him better, right? Like, how does that affect the motivation of those players? How does that affect, just the general status of that locker room? Team chemistry is weird. I feel like it's there right now, right? I feel like team chemistry with the Saints team is where you want it. So before you make any trade like this, you have to consider, hey, how will this affect that room? Because just as easily as he could show up and put you over the top from an offensive perspective, he could show up and kind of tilt things in a negative way too. So you have to weigh that. But it's hard not to like what this guy would offer. You bring him into the room. Now he's 31 years old. He's played in 153 career games, but he has kind of been a tank in his career. He's played at least 14 games in 8 of his 10 seasons. He has never played fewer than 12 games in a season. In each of the last 2 years, he's played in all 17 games. This year, he played in the first 3 games. He's nursing a hamstring injury now. I find it hard to believe that, oh, yeah, okay, I'm hurt now, and then I want to trade, and that has nothing to do with it, right? Like, you look at a Chris Olave playing through a hamstring injury last week. Are you going to play through an injury for a team that you're not committed to? Probably not. So I'm not going to put a lot of emphasis on that injury right now as a reason you should or should not make this trade, but that's where it is. So you look at it, you say, hey, he's in year 3 of a $140 million contract. It's a 5-year deal. His cap hit each of the next 2 seasons as it stands right now is $44 million. Just let that wash over you for a second. That's not the entire value of the contract. That's his cap hit over the next 2 years individually. So you're talking $88 million over the 2025 and 2026 seasons that you were dedicated to. Now, that's not all guaranteed, but in order to make this work, you're going to have to start restructuring, pushing stuff forward, guaranteeing more money. So you're going to get into a scenario where this team that you kind of felt like the organizational philosophy was, hey, we like the pieces in the building. We feel like Dennis Allen and Derek Carr can get the job done, but we're going to wait and see what happens, right? Like, it's very clear that this Saints organization is not head over heels with this group in the sense of, hey, we're not in win now mode, and this is a win now trade, right? This is very much would be a win now trade. And the thought experiment I give you on this is, okay, look at it and say, the reason Davante, which the Saints and the Jets would be his 2 preferred destinations, obviously there's a common denominator there. It's quarterback he played with. He played with Derek Carr at Fresno State. He played with Derek Carr for a season with the Raiders. Clearly, despite how that ended, it's not coloring his opinion on playing with Derek Carr. So that's a positive thing. The other side is the Jets, Aaron Rodgers. So this is not a quarterback. This is not a player who's just picking his quarterbacks flippantly. You can't just take him in and say, well, we're just adding Davante Adams. It has nothing to do with Derek Carr. It has to do with Derek Carr, because I look at it this way. Take Derek Carr and even Keith Williams to that extent. Keith Williams is a private wide receivers coach. He worked with Tyreek Hill, Davante, a few other guys. So they know each other. But kind of take that out of the equation and just look at the Saints and say, this group with quarterback blank is looking at trading for a 31-year-old wide receiver who makes $35+ million a year. How would you feel about that trade, right? Like, independent of anything else, would you feel like, oh yes, no brainer, go do it? No. You would say that's a bad idea for a team in the scenario the Saints are in to go do that. So you're making this trade because of Derek Carr, right? You're not making this trade in spite of Derek Carr. You are making this trade because of Derek Carr. And that's significant because, I know the agenda, right? Like, a lot of people are excited about the agenda. I haven't heard about it as much over the course of the season that I did in the preseason. But here's my thing. If you're in a conversation at a bar with somebody and they say, I want Spencer Rattler to be the starting quarterback of the Saints next year, and do with that information what you will. I'm not telling you should want that to happen or you shouldn't want that to happen. But you are talking to someone who wants Spencer Rattler to be the starting quarterback of the Saints. And in the next breath, they say, I want the Saints to go trade for Davante Adams. To me, those ideas are mutually exclusive. You cannot believe those two things at the same time. Because this trade, if you made this trade, you are virtually guaranteeing at least one more year of Dennis Allen and Derek Carr. Probably more. And it's for a few reasons. One, because you are saying, hey, I trust this group enough to go make this win now trade and go try to do something with it. And in a weak NFC, in a year where I don't see any real juggernauts in the NFL. The juggernaut of the NFC was the 49ers. And without Christian McCaffrey, that's a very beatable team. So, I mean, you're looking at that and you're saying, hey, we're going to go all in with these guys. So that's not a trade you make if you're, hey, we're just going to cut the head off the snake and keep going. No, that's a trade you make to a group you're committed to. Beyond that, the only way to make this contract work would be to continue to push forward Derek Carr's cap hit and continue to push forward a lot of the veteran cap hits that I think some people would prefer that the Saints move on from, right? If you're of the idea that the Saints should start tearing things down piece by piece, or at least kind of veteran contract by veteran contract, which is the reality, then you can't be for this trade. Those two things don't add up. So just keep that in mind. And I'm not saying that's a good reason to not make the trade. I'm just saying, like, if you are of the belief that the Saints should be working their way back to the middle from a salary cap perspective, then this is not a trade you can make. This is a I'm tweaking out because I haven't made a crazy contract decision in a while, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to go all in, 2-2. That's all I need to see. I don't know. I think it's tough. It's tough because you look at a team that I feel like can win. I feel like can be a playoff contender. But my philosophy on trades as it pertains to kind of these big money win now trades is you can make them and you can justify them if the goal of that trade is to take yourself from a Super Bowl contender to a Super Bowl favorite, or from a playoff contender to a Super Bowl contender. I don't think you can make them justifiably if your goal is to go from a non-playoff team to a playoff team. And the fact of the matter is, this is a team that has missed 3 consecutive postseasons. That's what the trade would be for. It would be, hey, we believe with Davante Adams in the fold that we could become a playoff team. I don't know if this team can win in the postseason. I need to see them get there. This isn't the example I turned to was kind of the Rams in 21, right? You traded for Matt Stafford mid-season. You added Odell Beckham. You made a bunch of trades. You gave away a ton of draft picks, right? But that was a team that had made the Super Bowl a few years earlier. I know we've collectively tried to erase that from our memory banks, but that's the bones of that team had been to the Super Bowl a few years earlier. They were a perennial playoff contender, and they felt like we finally have the pieces. We're going to push all of our chips into the table and go get that Super Bowl, and they got it. Are you willing to sit here and tell me that the Saints, with the structure they have, the outlook they have, the pieces in the building, should feel like, here's my chips, they're right here, Tearing it down is over here. Tearing it down and going with a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback is taking your chips from the middle of the table and pulling them closer to you, walking over to the cashier and taking whatever you have left and leaving with it, right? That's what that would be. What this would be is taking your chips, putting them in the middle of the table, then throwing the deed to your house on top of it. How confident are you in that? And so that's where we are. That's where the Saints are. That's where this conversation is. And I don't know how realistic it is. I don't even know how realistic a trade of this magnitude is. I think we're going to kind of drag this out and figure out, okay, what is the market for Davante Adams? Because if you can find a way to get him in here with not a second round pick, maybe a fourth round pick, and then figure out the money on top of that, I think you can get something done. I just don't think trading a second round pick and an asset would make a ton of sense. And that's what the Raiders are reportedly looking for, is a second round, like a high day 2 pick and an asset on top of that. Now, the Saints would probably have to send an asset either way just to try to make some of the money work. And the popular name you'll hear people say is Paulson Adebo. Now, if I'm the Raiders, is that a guy that I want, considering I have to go extend him anyway? And the only reason people are saying Paulson Adebo is because he's the guy we're mad at this week, right? Because of that pass interference and a couple bad plays. So he's the guy that people are ready to push out the door. He's on a contract year, so I don't know, but it's hard for me to get past the Jets, a team that must feel pretty desperate considering what they've already done to bring in Aaron Rodgers. Must feel pretty desperate to get something done this year, the next year, because what else are you going to do? You've already hitched your horse to that wagon. You have cap space, so it's a much more reasonable addition. You have the assets. The Saints have the assets. This is one of the few years that, when I say, can they make this trade? Yes, the Saints have the assets. They have all 7 of their picks for next season and probably a comp pick coming in. So, you can justifiably do that. You can. And me, someone who courts chaos on a regular basis, I'm all for it. Go bring me Davante Adams. Let's see what happens. But from a more sensible perspective, would it benefit you in the long run to do it this way? I don't know. Because here's the thing, you just moved on from a player that was similar to Davante Adams from a skill set perspective. You couldn't make it work with Mike Thomas. Now, is Davante going to be more of a Derek Carr guy? Probably. Is that the answer? Maybe. But I don't think that anything Mike Thomas and Derek Carr were able to do together was particularly exciting. Now, this is a different offense. This is a situation where maybe you can incorporate him more. But this is an offense that we've seen run 11 personnel at a very low rate. Is that a product of, okay, we don't trust the third wide receiver on the roster anyway, and we're going to have him block, so we might as well have that be a tight end? Maybe. That's a question that Clint Kubiak will probably be asked at some point and not actually give a satisfactory answer to. But you would have to change how you're operating to incorporate Davante Adams. And you would have to change your reads on plays, right? You would that's the biggest change for the Saints offense from years past is Chris Olave is the primary on basically every read. Now, are you going to change that up? Are you going to reincorporate your entire offense around Davante Adams? Or is he just going to be kind of someone you insert midstream and try to figure it out with? And I don't know. NFL offenses are tough. And I just don't know if you can do that in the middle of the season. I've never seen the Saints really try to do that. I've seen them bring in defensive players, right? You talk about Eli Apple, Jackrabbit Jenkins, guys like that. Even running back, you saw them add Mark Ingram, but obviously that was an offense that he knew like the back of his hand, so that wasn't all that difficult. I don't know. It's tough. But we'll see. Either way, I look at it and say, if they made this trade, at what point in the season would it actually impact the offense? Because it's not going to be on Monday in Kansas City. You could trade for him literally this second, and he would not be prepared to run offense against Kansas City. So you can throw that one out the window. So you got to go find a way to win that game with the team on the field right now. You're on a short week hosting the Bucks. If you traded for him again right now, you would be hard pressed to have him ready to go for that week 6 matchup, right? So you're throwing everything into flux. And then you've got 2 games, which you lose both of those games. Suddenly you're 2-4. Suddenly your season is not only not going well, you're talking about, man, are you on the fringe of saying, let's hit the eject button at 2-4? I don't think you would be, but you have to start considering it. Then you have a short week against the Broncos. So would he even be ready for that? Probably not, at least not at a level you would need him to be to actually improve your offense, right? So we're probably talking about week 8 if you made this trade before Davante Adams actually had a positive impact on this offense, just realistically speaking. And by week 8, you could potentially be 2-5. And then you would be kind of adding this star wide receiver, making $35 million a year, trying to rescue your season. I don't see it happening, guys. I really don't. As much as fun as it would be to watch Davante Adams incorporated into this offense, I just don't. I don't see it happening. And the reason is it's midseason. If this was in the summer when they should have been trying to trade Davante Adams, I would say, of course, you do this and you figure it out. Mid-season, it becomes a lot more complicated. And I don't know. Like, I don't feel like this offense is at a point where you feel like you need to do this to make things work. But I don't know. I don't think the Saints are a Super Bowl or bust team, and this would be a Super Bowl or bust move. The hilarious thing is Mike Florio put out a list of 9 possible landing spots for Davante Adams. The Saints aren't on it. I need to know. Like, why does Mike Florio hate the Saints? What did New Orleans do to Mike Florio? Only wrong answers in the comments. Well, tell me in the comments what New Orleans did to make Mike Florio so mad, and I'll go through the best ones in the mailbag. But either way, that's where we are. We'll see how this develops in the next few days, right? If I had to pick now, I'd say the Jets and Aaron Rodgers, the reunion in New York, the other Ohio State receiver that got picked in the first round of the 2021 draft gets supplanted by Davante Adams, and that would be Garrett Wilson. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Either way, we're going to hear from Keith Williams in this next segment, Saints wide receivers coach. Now, this was an interview done before all of this hit the fan, so you're not going to hear him talk about Davante all that much, but he had some interesting insights on all of that. But either way, that's where I land on it. I don't think it's going to happen. I would love for it to happen, and we'll see. There's like 70 comments in there. I haven't gotten to go through them yet, but we'll wrap this segment up. We're going to come back with that interview with Keith Williams. This is Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. It is Wednesday. The Saints didn't practice today, so I have no information on the Saints practice participation. I take that back. The Saints did practice today, but we were not entitled to go and deal with that practice. So I have no information regarding that practice. We'll have information on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But gonna hit a break here. Gonna come back. Who dat? Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold, getting you a quick live edition on this great Wednesday that I mostly had off. It's nice. I didn't do anything but complain to people on Twitter and watch some film and do all that good stuff. I am Jeff Nowak, and we're going to be hearing from Saints wide receivers coach Keith Williams in this segment. He hopped on WWL with Bobby Hebert and Mike Haas earlier in the week. Now, Keith does have a connection to Davante Adams. Keith is a He previously was kind of an independent wide receivers coach. He worked with guys like Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, another cast of characters. Like, you can name a bunch of them. But this is what I meant to play this in the last segment. This is what Davante Adams had to say about Keith Williams when he was asked on Kay Adams' show a few weeks ago. He was actually talking about Rashid Shaheed in this clip because it was after week 2 and Rashid had that long touchdown against the Cowboys, and everyone was, talking about how great Rashid was. And for whatever reason, Kay Adams and Davante Adams have some synergy, and that's what this is. So here's Davante Adams talking about Rashid Shaheed, and he mentions Keith Williams in this clip.
I do think that some of his is going to continue to evolve as far as the love that he gets, and I think he's getting some of the early Tyreek love right now, the speed and the stretch the field and all of that. But if you really pay attention to his game, the man can play. He can run routes. He got the best coach in the world over there to work with right now. So he's only going to get better. So I'm locked in. He first got my attention when I seen 22 running a bomb down the right side. I'm like, I don't know how many times I've seen number 22 running a go route, but yeah, that man he's a baller. I'm looking forward to seeing him continue to evolve in this league.
Yeah, so I agree. Watching 22 run really fast down the field is strange. But yeah, he referred to Keith as the best coach in the world to work with. He didn't name check him, but that's who he is talking about. He's not talking about Clint Kubiak or Dennis Allen. He's talking about Keith Williams. And so just that's a factor. And all of this conversation is Davante Adams, Keith Williams, Derek Carr, that trio. They go way back, and even have some other Fresno State guys, right? Because Jordan Mims and Jake Haener are both Fresno State guys. So if they did trade for Davante Adams, you would have the core 4 Fresno State gentlemen in that room together, which is kind of fascinating. But let's hear from Keith Williams again. He talked to Bobby Hebert, Mike Haas. I cannot account for anything Bobby Hebert says in this clip, but without further ado, let's listen to it.
Tell me about what you walked into. Obviously, because of your career, and you also are a personal wide receivers coach, and Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, and then you get Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Tell me what kind of tools in the tool chest that gave you from a wide receiving coaching standpoint.
Well, you're right. Those guys, they have a lot of talent. They, as far as what you're saying, they do have a lot of tools in their toolbox. So it makes it easy. It makes it exciting to work with guys and develop them when they walk in with that much talent.
Coach Williams, how do you coach up? Because I think it has to be instinct, and also, physics come into play, your physical stature. But as far as the 2 areas, this is what I've always noticed. I play with great receivers, Mark Super Duper. I play with Anthony Carter, Eric Martin, Andre Rison, and all that. And I look at, receivers. It doesn't matter 20th century, 21st century, the past 30, 40 years. But I look at 2 things. The contested catches, almost you're going up for a rebound, or the yards after the catch. Okay, when you catch the ball, are you falling down, or are you making people miss? What are you actually doing? How do you coach that up? When you got a young talent like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed?
Well, you named a pretty good group of guys that you play with, so I'm familiar with all those guys. That was a great group you just named. But that's a great question, and you can train it, you can teach it, and you can develop it. It starts with the mindset and their standard and their expectation level of themselves to understand and believe that they can be better in both of those areas, contested catches and run after the catch. Because guys have the talent to do that. Guys have the talent to make contested catches and to make guys miss and be threats after the catch. But they have to believe they can, and they have to have the mentality to do that, each and every time they get an opportunity to. And so you develop the mentality, you establish that, and then you practice that way to where those practice habits become your style of play. So in the game, when those situations come up, when those incidents come up, your style of play takes over, and you make the most of every opportunity in both of those categories.
Now, Coach Williams, I mentioned, Rashid Shaheed, he can take the top off the defense. I'll look at Chris Olave. I think he's gotten stronger. He has skins on the wall. Look at Cedric Wilson Jr., a 7-year veteran. who comes to the Saints. But how do you challenge and develop? Like, I'm just going to name these like 3 youngsters, like above means. The rookie, coming out of Pitt. And then I look Mason Tipton. He flashed and caught everyone's attention during training camp. But I've been disappointed in A.T. Perry. Is he hurt? Is he that hurt? Or where is he at? Because, when I look his size, and I said, I don't know, that's a big son of a gun. He's 6'5", 205, 210, around there. So just talk about those young receivers and the challenges, how you got to push the right buttons with them to get them motivated. And so you can't just be happy to be on the team. You got to be a difference maker.
There's no doubt about it. The way I do it is you make sure that every day they go out to practice trying to get better. And so practice is just not going out there and knowing the plays. Practice is knowing the plays, knowing the offense, and running your route the best you possibly can every time you run a route. And that comes from how hard you work an individual. That comes from how much you're watching film, not just of the offense itself, but watching yourself, watching how you move, watching how you execute the fundamentals of individual route running. And so each one of those guys you name and everybody in the room ultimately goes out to practice trying to run the best route, trying to have the best period of individual that they can every day, because when we practice Wednesday, I expect you to be better on Friday. I expect you to be better at the end of the week, better than you were at the beginning of the week. That shows that you were working. So every day, that's the mindset, and hopefully your skill develops and you get better because of that.
Coach, you played college football at San Diego State and also ran track, and 100 meters was your specialty. Just wondering how much of the track and field world you bring to the coaching aspect of these wide receivers in the NFL.
Well, just not very much in terms of just specifics and as far as the 100 meters in terms of sprinting, but the fundamentals of route running to make your drive phase and your vertical phase of your route look the same. Try to get to maximum speed out of your stance until you get to the break point. Try to not show any indicators in terms of raising up. You want to have a good natural upper body lean like the sprinter as you attack the DB in your route running. So some of those general principles of sprinting, I incorporate them in my coaching style.
Coach Williams, how do you approach them? Because, I've been around some young cats. They'd be like, man, I'm a receiver. I'm not blocking. Well, you're a big part of what we're trying to do, so you better want to block. And, I look at in the past, especially post-Katrina, a couple of guys who, remember with Sean Payton, were outstanding run-blocking receivers, Devery Henderson, Robert Meacham. And then all of a sudden that 6, 7, 8-yard run turns into like 20-plus. Or maybe you take it to the house. I know you probably get on the receivers and, no, listen, that I know you want to catch the ball, but you can be at times and make the team and have a long career if you're willing to block and just do your damn job when it's called upon as far as blocking. I know you challenge the receivers with that, don't you?
There's no doubt about it. I addressed that with them the day I got here. Blocking is part of your job, number one, but also blocking is a part of you having self-pride and how you look to the rest of your teammates. When we cut the film on and we watch it here as an offensive unit, and AK or whoever's the ball carrier breaks a big run, and your guy makes the tackle, and it's because of lack of effort, that ain't any good. And so you don't ever want to be that guy on the film that's not making this block because of lack of effort. Now, if you get out executed, that's one thing. But if the defensive back makes a tackle because of lack of effort, that's unacceptable. As you mentioned, I played at San Diego State. One of my best friends, and one of my best friends now, and then my teammate was Marshall Faulk. And obviously he's a Hall of Fame NFL running back, and he was a consensus All-American. You have to block for him, but at the same time, he was my good friend, so I wanted to block for him. And so those are some of the principles I instill in these guys to make them understand how important blocking is, besides it overall just being your job. But the reason why it's important also is there's some internal reasons, that I explain that help them understand the importance of it. And they've understood that to this point, and they've been doing a good job blocking.
So you go to Kansas City. Rashid Rice gets hurt yesterday against the Chargers, but just because I know as a personal wide receiving training coach, you're always aware of what's out there. Talk about their rookie. Xavier Worthy had a 54-yard touchdown yesterday. The next-gen stats said he was at 21 miles an hour, which to the layperson doesn't mean a ton. I know he's fast as heck, but talk about him and that kind of rare Rashid Shaheed kind of speed.
Well, I know him a little bit because we're from the same area, California, and so just like you said, it's rare to have a combination of speed and wide-out natural talent that he has. And what's rare for him, as far as that combination is concerned, is that he can actually catch. You know, he's not just a slot wide-out, even though his stature may suggest that, because he has natural hands and the ability to track the deep ball and basically make every type of catch, you know, makes him the type of wideout he is and the type of wideout that seems like he's going to be, because he's able to make all the catches and get behind you on a deep ball.
Now, Coach Williams, when I look at, a practice and how it's structured, and you got scout team and all that, and just talk about as a coach that it's not like, got scout team offense going against the first defense. How do you treat the receivers then, even though they might be running the other team's routes to give the defense a good look? Do you challenge them also that you can get better yourself? Because every time you have an opportunity on the field, but just talk about that when you construct it in practice, and even like you're running another team's maybe plays, but you are a receiver and you want to give a good look to your defense to help the team.
Well, you make an excellent point, and the number one thing I tell them is work on your game. Work on your game. This is how you get better. We all have post route, curl routes, dig routes, comeback routes in our offense. So when you look on the card or when you hear your assignment to run the other team's plays, we too have a post route. We too have a curl route. So you have an opportunity to work on your game, develop your game, even though you may be running another team's plays, but we also have that route that you're running. And also, you're giving our defensive backs the best look possible, because, when we go face Xavier Worthy, like you're saying, we just faced Mooney, we just faced London. Those guys are going to be trying their best to run good routes, and beat our defensive back. So
I remember to unmute. Are you proud of me? Usually I don't. Usually I talk for like 5 minutes before I remember that I left myself muted. So this time I'm going to talk about how I'm not muted, because you can hear me. Anyway, so yeah, that was Saints wide receivers coach Keith Williams talking about blocking at the wide receiver position, talking about contested catches. And, obviously, again, that was an interview recorded before all of this Davante Adams news kind of got busy. But that to me is, and I know there's been some conversation about Mike Thomas and the whole, Davante Adams and Mike Thomas are not the same. My point is, what this offense has been lacking for the last 4 weeks is a contested catch receiver. And that's been the case since you didn't have Mike Thomas, right? You haven't had that guy. Like, go back. Okay. So the Falcons game, right? Go back and watch that fourth down kind of fade to Rashid Shaheed. He got a hand on it, right? And it looks stunningly similar to week 1, 2022, 2021, 2022. It was Dennis Allen's first game, right? Go watch the touchdown catch that Mike Thomas had over the Falcons defender. I think it was, his name is escaping me, but either way, like, he goes up, makes that catch, touchdown, makes it look so easy. And when you don't have that, things get a lot more difficult, right? That's a play where you say, hey, I got one-on-one and I'm going to throw it up and I trust my guy to go get it. Well, when you don't have a guy that can go get it, then it looks like a bad throw. It looks like a bad decision. It looks like a bad play. It looks like a bad idea. And I think that's what, if I want Davante Adams on this team, that's what I am trying to add, is that big body physical guy who can go up and beat a defender one-on-one. And, Davante's not a huge guy. He's 6'1", 215, but he plays bigger than that. And, that's kind of where I am. It's just funny because you look at Davante and you look at a lot of the players, or a lot of people saying, hey, come in. And then you go back to that Raiders game when the Saints shut him out, and it was Alontae Taylor locking up Davante. And now here we are. We have Derek Carr as the quarterback, and we're talking about, hey, let's get Davante Adams. But either way, that's Keith Williams. I think he's done really well with this group. To first things first. Like, I think especially Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, I do think that what will be lost in this Davante Adams conversation is that both those guys are playing very well at the wide receiver position. I think Chris has been excellent. And the only question has been whether you can block for Derek long enough for him to get him the ball. I think he's caught 20 of 24 targets, a touchdown. He's been a first down machine in important situations. I think Rashid, it's kind of tarnished by that fumbled kickoff, the muff punt that went to the end zone, the Jose Canseco style. Here you go. You have a score here. But I think he's coming off arguably his best all-around game as a complete wide receiver, right? 8 catches, 83 yards. He had several key first down conversions. Now we're all going to talk about the muff punt because it was such a significant play in that game. But there's another world where the Saints pull that game out and we're talking about, wow, this wide receiver duo has really come on strong. Instead we're 2-2 and looking at that. So I do want to give Keith Williams credit. He's a guy people in that locker room really like for good reason. My issue with this Saints offense at large, and it's something they're going to have to address one way or the other, is I need more production out of players not named Shaheed, not named Olave, not named Taysom, not named Kamara, right? From weeks 2 through 4, I have these numbers here. Let me pull it up. I looked it up yesterday because I wanted to talk about it. From weeks 2 through 4, so that's Cowboys, which is a game you dominated on offense. Eagles, a game you did not dominate on offense, and then the Falcons, which is kind of somewhere in the middle. Weeks 2 through 4, players not named Kamara, Carr, Olave, Shaheed, Taysom, combined for 22 touches. That's 12 catches, 10 rushing attempts for 72 yards. That's 49 receiving yards, 23 rushing yards. That is it. That is it. In the last 3 games, players not named Kamara, Olave, Shaheed, Taysom, Carr have combined for less total yards than both Shaheed and Olave got by themselves in week 4. And, I had someone say, well, I mean, is that unusual for those are your top 4 playmakers? Why would that not be tilted very heavily in that direction? And sure, it should be. But keep in mind, Taysom missed a game and a half of that. Shaheed went an entire game without a catch in that span. And you still didn't get production from any of those other positions. Jamal Williams has gotten 3 carries the last 2 weeks. And in that span of time, Alvin Kamara has had 26 rushing attempts and got a broken rib. And then with a broken rib, got another 26 touches and has played well. So I don't know. I think that there's something has to be done and we'll figure it out. Kendre Miller is the obvious question mark in that group. He's eligible to return to practice this week. We talked to Dennis Allen on Monday. He said they had not made a decision yet. We're going to find out tomorrow if he's out there. I expect him to be out there because you kind of open up that 21-day practice window. And if you think he's going to be ready in that span of time, it would make sense to do it now so that you can get him back as early as possible. I don't know if he'll be ready to go week 5, but I want to get that ball rolling. So I expect to see him out there. And maybe he can be one of those kind of change of pace options that picks up some yardage. He did it in week 18 last year, missed a lot of time. He's got to stay healthy. That's the question. A.T. Perry is the other guy. Talking about, hey, I don't have a contested catch guy. The 6'5" dude who can go up and moss people should be that contested catch guy. He can't stay healthy either. So it's frustrating. And I don't, and my thing about the Davante trade, and we're going to keep talking about it because all the comments and questions in there are about Davante Adams. So we're going to keep talking about Davante Adams. I don't want to overreact to that situation and make this trade because of that. I want those guys to step up. I want Juwan Johnson to be some semblance of what we feel like Juwan Johnson can be. Why cannot you find a way to get some level of production out of Juwan Johnson? Something. And I get the blocking. I get that. I get that you need him to be a part of the offensive line scheme. I get that. But man, you're getting 2 tight ends on the field a lot. You can't find a way to get him out on a route and target him. I just don't like that. And like that's what feels like it's missing from this offense is kind of that big bodied receiver who can beat a guy in coverage. Right. And you just haven't had it. So we'll see how that goes. Either way, I think Keith Williams is a good addition to this team and we'll see how that goes. Again, you haven't had the production from the wide receivers down the line, but you have had really good production from the top end wide receivers, and that's what I need. Well, we can find a way to generate some offensive production from other places. I still need those guys to be playing like stars, and they have. So I think that's a good thing. Thanks again to Keith Williams for coming on WWL. And we'll wrap this segment up. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. I referenced that Dennis Allen interview. That is also on our YouTube channel if you want to go check it out. He also chatted with Mike Haas and Bobby Abed. These were from the same program earlier in the week. Dennis Allen comes on WWL every Monday to kind of break it down. Mickey Loomis comes on Tuesdays to not really say anything, to talk like a GM. That's how GMs operate. But so make sure to check that out if you haven't every Monday, and we'll continue to bring elements of that into the show. I'm glad we kind of had nothing to talk about, because a lot of times I want to play you some of these interviews from that show and we just don't have time, or there's too much to talk about. So I'm glad we were able to get that in there. But again, Inside Black and Gold, I'm Jeff Nowak. We'll be coming back with a mailbag. There's been about 130 or some odd questions, comments. So I'll get through as many as I can. And we'll be doing that. I'll also be on Sports Talk later today to get in with Steve and Charlie Long. And that's where Steve is. I saw someone ask, where's Sleepy Steve? I think that's what Charles calls him, Sleepy Steve, because he's a sleepy looking guy. He's hosting the show. So I'll be on with him later. But otherwise, we'll be coming back. We'll be doing a mailbag. So if you have any comments, questions, anything else, throw them in there. This will be a little bit longer of a break as I get that all set up. But otherwise, who dat? Stick around. And we're back for one more segment here on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. If you haven't subscribed yet, again, do that. Hit the subscribe button here on YouTube. Go check us out on Apple Podcasts. Leave a rating, leave a review. We haven't gotten as many of those as I would have liked. But either way, I appreciate all the feedback. A lot of y'all hit me up on Twitter. I try to get back to as many people as possible. Sometimes I have to shut it down, but you can follow me at Jeff_Nowak. DMs are open. I've been saying that for a long time, that DMs are open, but they weren't, because apparently when Elon took it over, he changed a bunch of the settings and it automatically defaulted to closed, even though I had them open. So they are open now. So feel free to reach out. Let me know if you'd like to hear anything. Let me know if you'd like any particular segments, anything you'd like us to focus on, anything you'd like me to shut up about. I'm all ears. But let's get into it. A mailbag segment. And I think this is a good conversation to have, at least get into it a little bit more. I'm not going to pretend to be a salary cap contract expert, but Rose City D, you heard me, said Tay only has money guaranteed this year. Other 2 years are void. I understand why you're saying that. From the perspective of cap conversations, these are not void years. These are contract years. Now, what the Saints will do is take a contract, restructure it, add void years to the end of it. And I believe you can add up to 3, and you can stretch out the cap hit evenly over those years, right? So when we're talking about void years, that's what those are. These are contract years. Now, I think where you're mixing up is the guarantee, which if you have 3 years left in your deal and none of it's guaranteed, then obviously you could cut that person and not have any cap liability to him. That's not true with Davante, although there is a good percentage of his contract that is not guaranteed. And I had it pulled up and then I accidentally closed out of it. So let me do that again. So obviously it was a 5-year, $140 million contract when he signed it ahead of, it's opening, it's loading. ahead of the 2022 season. So that was, when he joined the Raiders with Derek Carr and all that. That only lasted 1 year. That was the Josh McDaniels experiment. They benched Derek Carr at the end of the season. I think Davante at the time said he was not a fan of this. Clearly, the issues within that building were not between Davante and Derek. And so you have it. But obviously, okay, 5-year, $140 million contract. Now, there is an out after this year. You could cut him with $15.7 million in dead cap. But the problem with that idea is you're not going to be able to just absorb his cap number for this year. You're going to have to find ways to manage that. You'll probably push contracts forward. You'll probably try to get him to sign some kind of an extension so that you can manipulate that money in a way that works for you. The Saints have about like $4 million in cap space right now. You have levers that you can pull with Alvin Kamara's contract. I think that's probably what you would do, is you would give Alvin that extension he's been asking for and rework Davante's deal in a way that makes sense. But from that perspective, the idea that you're looking at this and saying this could be a 1-year rental, I just don't think that's in the cards. I don't think you're making this trade with the idea that maybe we get out of it next year, right? You're only making this trade if it's a longer term play, because that's the only way you can make that make sense. And going forward, you're going to have to push out your commitment to Derek Carr. You're going to have to push out your commitment to several veteran players, because those are the guys with contracts that you can restructure. You can't restructure a rookie backup quarterback's contract. He's not making enough money. It's only the guys who are making money that you can restructure. So the idea that you can make this trade and say, if it doesn't work this year, we can get out from under it. It's not happening, because this is not a contract you'll be able to trade. And that's just the reality of it. If you're making this trade, and here's the thing: if I'm Derek Carr and Dennis Allen, I want it. I'm pushing for it, because I don't think there's anything that could happen throughout the course of this season that would give those two guys better job security than making this trade and bringing in Davante Adams. Because it's setting up a scenario where if you got to the point at the end of this season where you were like, I kind of want to tear it down and start from scratch, it would be such a mess that you would have a hard time hiring a coach. You would have a hard time hiring your top option for head coach to come in and take that over. Now, maybe you could elevate Clint Kubiak and do something with that. I don't know. But either way, that's not a scenario you want to be in. So that contract is going to be very difficult to manage if you do make this trade. And it is not a conversation about a 1-year rental. Justin De Niro says you trade Paulson and whatever compensation is needed for Adams. And yeah, I think that's going to be the popular idea. Now, if I'm the Raiders, I probably would prefer an Alontae Taylor, a guy with another year of team control that you can deal with, and you can play inside outside. I don't know what the Raiders want. Are the Raiders a cornerback away from relevance? Probably not. Are the Raiders going to feel like, hey, we're improving with a cornerback on the outside? I don't know, but we'll see. I think for them, it's going to be more about the draft compensation than the player. But now Paulson's going to be the guy that everyone says, oh, let's do this. Saint for Life says, no. Adams is 32 years old and his contract is an issue regardless. He's going to want his money. Saints need to get younger and cheaper. End of story. Many issues on this team. And I think that's the pragmatic approach, right? That's the okay, I'm looking at this team and seeing maybe they can get to the postseason and figure it out from there. I am not looking at this team and saying, okay, well, we're definitely a playoff team, so this will put you into Super Bowl contention. I just don't see it that way. Now, maybe the team does. Maybe inside the building, that's true. But I do think genuinely, this is a trade you make if you do genuinely believe that you are a Super Bowl contender. Not that pie in the sky idea that everyone goes into the season with of like, oh, yeah, we believe we can make a Super Bowl. The Cam Jordan, we believe we can make a Super Bowl thing where you talk to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, I think that's the correct mindset to be in for a team. You don't want your team to walk in there saying, like, we don't have a chance. But I think there's a difference between that and there being genuine belief throughout the building that you are one player away. And I don't know how that could be the case. I'm just going to go through some comments here quickly. Don't need to get into all of them. I just want to get as many of them as possible. Justin De Niro, we need a leader in the wide receiver room the young receivers can actually learn from. No disrespect to Wilson, but he's not it. I don't disagree with that. Now, I think there's a difference between adding a leader and adding someone who is going to supplant your young star receiver who feels like, I've been doing my job as well as I can. I have been sacrificing for the team. I have been committing myself as a blocker. You heard Keith Williams talk about that. That's something from day one that they needed Shaheed and Olave to be able to do and commit themselves to. And I feel like they've done everything right. And so I do think that, like, it's not just about bringing in a leader. It's about, like, how do these guys feel about that? Like, you're going to have to navigate that in the locker room before you even consider doing this. And I don't think anyone will say, "Hey, no, I'm gonna veto that." And I don't even think they have the option to veto that. But you would have to sell this in that locker room in a way that works for everybody, and that's a challenge. And that's something that falls on the coaching staff. Can this coach do that? I don't know. Either way, I appreciate the comment. Rose City says, extend AK, create money. You can get the Raiders to eat some money if that's what you want. Yeah, I mean, I think both of those would probably happen. Jackson Carter says, trade for him. Saints don't draft well anyways anymore. You know, one of these days I'm going to really break down the drafting, and we can talk about how bad has it been really. I don't think it's been as bad as most people seem to believe. You've missed on a couple first round picks, and that'll make it seem real bad. My issue with the Saints draft strategy has been you have not taken enough throws at the board. You have not gotten enough bites of the apple. So when you do miss on draft picks, it seems way more damaging because you don't have those kind of dart throws in the second round, the third round, the fourth round, right? Marcus Davenport being a miss was far more significant because you gave up all the assets to go get him. This would be another example of you leveraging your draft assets for the now rather than giving yourself the best opportunity to succeed in the draft, right? So I don't think the issue is that they haven't drafted particularly well. I think the issue is you haven't had enough assets to, because every team's going to have a hit rate. They're going to have some hits. They're going to have some misses. I don't think the hit rate has been too low. I think the hit rate has been fine. You're just not hitting the numbers you need. So I think to be honest, this is the type of move that makes their drafting look worse than it is. Because when they miss on 50% of their picks, which is a reasonable number in the NFL, your front number is going down because your back number is down. Anyway, I'll just leave that there. Get Adams. Charles Como says, get Adams and Mark Andrews. That's a tough one. Trading for Adams. I don't know. I don't want to see a top 14th round, top 1 through 4 round pick traded. Yeah, I think that's probably what it's going to come down to. Is the Saints are going to probably try to wait this market out. The trade deadline is a week later this year than it typically would be. So I think that's probably what they're going to do, is they're going to try to wait it out and see if, hey, we can get this on our terms. And if they can do that, hey, maybe it gets done. I have a hard time looking at a second round pick and saying, yeah, just send it. Saint for Life says, the core of this team is aging veterans with large money due. Cam Jordan has become a part-time player, making a huge amount of money. He is on the books the next few seasons. Ramczyk, Lattimore, DeMario. Yeah, I mean, it's the type of decision that you make and you're like, well, we feel like this is the year we're going to start to straighten some of this stuff out. And you're like, actually, I want me some Davante. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to do both those things. Rich Vital says Adams automatically makes his team better because other team defenses have to double team him. I mean, sure, you had a star player. My question is, you haven't been able to get action for more than 2 wide receivers. Now, does that change with Davante? Or are you just trying to force feed him? That's a good question, but I appreciate the comment. Robin Strigar says there's no guarantee that a rebuild will be successful. Let's try to win now. I don't disagree with that. But it can't be win at all costs in this with this setup. I mean, if you made the playoffs the last 2 years and you feel like you're a game away, if you're the Lions and you're like, man, we're right there. You're the Rams in 21. We're right there. We just need that one more piece. Sure, but I don't see it that way. Justin De Niro says Adams would push us to the front of the division and probably the conference. As far as the trio of receivers, if we are truly in win now mode, then pull the trigger. Well, that's the question. Are you in win now mode? I don't know if you are. Charles Como says would be a lot easier to go all in on that trade if they were 4-0. See, I don't think it would be, because if you're 4-0, you'd be like, we have all these, everything's working out. Why would we need to make a trade? I think 2-2 is what's prompting you to be like, oh, you need to upgrade. So I don't know. We'll see. Al's Ghost says, Raiders fan here. We'll take a Debo and a third for Adams. You will. I don't know if you're really Al's Ghost or not. I assume that's the Al who you're referring to as the Ghost. If it is, then maybe he can have some say. Maybe Al Davis can haunt Mark Davis and say, take a Debo in a 3rd round pick. That's how I imagine Al's Ghost would sound in that context. I'm sorry I did that to you. All right. Rich Vital says, Adams is so good that if he gets traded tomorrow to the Saints, he could play this week. It's not about being good. It's not. It's not about being good. It's about understanding the offense and what your responsibilities are in a particular play. I don't think it would take him as long as, he's an 11-year veteran. He's played in multiple offenses, right? He's played for multiple teams. That will probably help. He's worked with Derek Carr in the past, so that communication should be a little bit better than some other situations. But the idea that you could just trade for him and he'll be ready to play this week, no way. There's no way. Robin Strugari says, Derek Carr is playing great. Let's put him in the best position to win. I do think Derek has been playing well. And, there's always going to be criticism of Derek. There's always going to be like, you should do this, you should do that. I think he is in a position to play well. And I think it's just a matter of, figuring out the offensive line, but we'll see. 992 RAS says, you don't have anyone on offense besides Kamara, Hill, Olave, and Rashid as threats. And I don't know if that's true either. I think it's that you have not taken advantage of them. You have not used them. You have other pieces there. You have Mason Tipton. You have, ideally you'll have Kendre Miller, right? I want to see A.T. Perry get involved. I want to see Juwan Johnson get involved. You just haven't. And so I do think that's what you would have to do, more so than say, hey, you have to go get another piece. You have to find a way to use the pieces you have. Keeping it real, Who Dat Sports Podcast says, so Jeff, would you make this trade and risk losing Alvin next season? I don't think that's true. I think that making this trade would force you to keep Alvin beyond this season because you'd have to extend him or do something with his contract that would keep him here next season. So I actually think, again, making this trade would not force you necessarily to make some hard decisions on guys. It would, in terms of putting them out to pasture, it would more likely force you to kind of run it back with the same group. Because again, the way the Saints operate their cap, you can keep the same team together. It's when they leave that things start to get expensive because all those void years roll up to the current year. So again, I think adding Davante would actually make it very likely that this offense next year is Derek Carr, the pieces you have, and whatever else you can do. It will prevent you from adding anything else, more likely. But thank you for the comment. 992 RS says his team is not playoff contenders. I think they're playoff contenders. They're not Super Bowl contenders. Justin De Niro says, since we're not getting any pass rusher or line help, the positions of need most, might as well go to the next area of concern, which is a wide receiver. Yeah, you're not trading for an offensive lineman. It just doesn't happen. Like the Jason Peters got signed the other day. Jason Peters is 42 years old. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at guys like that. So we'll see. Hopefully the offensive line can continue to get better. But the Stackanova says Adams may adjust his contract if he believes he can win with the Saints and he's on the same timeline as Cam, DeMario, Honey Badger, and Taysom. I mean, you could adjust the contract, but there's only so much adjusting you can do. I mean, he's not going to take a $20 million pay cut. But no, I do think that Davante, I'm sure at this point in his career, is more concerned about being somewhere where he feels he can A, play the best football and be supported. And when you're a player like Davante, I think one of the issues is you go from a kind of long time entrenched quarterback who does things a certain way, and there's a level of accountability and whatever that's occurring, and suddenly you go with a different quarterback who's new and younger, and that doesn't exist anymore. And you're like, well, this is how things worked when it was working well, so why are we not continuing to do this? And so I don't know, like it's weird because if I don't think that you could possibly make this trade without feeling like Derek has to be the key. But no, I mean, is the timeline for those veteran guys what you have to build around is the bigger question with this comment. It's like, are you basing everything off of we need to get DeMario a Super Bowl, we need to get Cam a Super Bowl, we need to do whatever, or are you pushing into the future and figuring out the plan beyond those guys? Because that was the case with Drew. You were trying to win with Drew for Drew. I think right now it's like we're going to see what we can do with this group, but it can't be, hey, we're on this timeline and we have to get it done before the clock strikes midnight, which it already seems like it has for Cam. And we'll see. This is a good comment question. So keeping it real, Who Dat Sports Podcast. I don't know why I like saying that the way I do. It says, Jeff, in actuality, I give it the possibility of the Saints pulling the trigger on a trade at maybe 8 to 10%. I think that's fair. And the caveat I would add to it is like, when are you making the trade, right? Like, are you paying the premium that the Raiders want because there's a market for him, or are you waiting this out and paying the price that you feel comfortable with? Because if it's the former, then I would say it's more like a 5% chance. If it's the latter, I would put it more like a 15 to 20% chance, right? Like if it's a trade on their terms, I don't see it happening, versus a trade on your terms. I think it gets a little bit more likely, if that makes sense. Wow, something that isn't completely about Davante, but still also is about Davante. It says Bike Life Terror 66 says Teron Armstead needs to come home and go get Davante ASAP. Make it happen. Let's go all in for both, like poker. Yeah, but the problem is, in poker, it only works when you win, and when you lose, you lose your house if you go all in. Anyway, but I mean, I would love to see Teron come back, but the problem with Teron and why you let him walk was he keeps getting hurt. And I don't know if you've been paying attention down in Miami. He wasn't out there on Monday because he got hurt. So I don't know. Like, I think that was the correct decision to let him walk, even though the offensive line has not been great since he's been gone. He's also been hurt basically every year down in Miami. I think he did make the Pro Bowl one year, but either way. Cello says, Jeff, adding Davante Adams would be nice, but seriously, until the Saints get the O-line back on track, it would not matter. That's a fair comment. I'll let you have that. ZD says, why would he bring chaos? Davante was simply mad about the team and just went to trade the dude he went there for. I mean, I'm not saying that he would bring chaos. Like, I'm not saying that Davante showing up in the building would bring chaos. I'm saying chaos as a concept is making this type of trade and throwing everything into lurch, on a tilt mid-season. Like, that's chaos. Now, chaos isn't always bad. Chaos can work out in your favor, but that's the chaos I'm referring to. I'm like the Joker, right? Like, I don't even know what I'd do if I caught the car. All right. Justin De Niro says, I say Adebo in competition, not because we're mad, but because it's a position we are overly good at. We just drafted McKinstry, and Taylor is playing out of his mind. Meanwhile, Adebo is on a contract year. Yes, but if Adebo had made a pass breakup on that play versus a pass interference, we would be talking about, like, pay the man his money. The John Malkovich, or whatever. His name's not John Malkovich. That's the character he played. But that meme or that GIF of pay the man his money. That's what we were saying about Paulson Adebo if he had made that play versus pass interference. So that's why I think it's a lot easier to be like, Adebo. That said, if I'm the Raiders, I'm like, I don't want the guy on the contract here. I want the guy under team control. So I think I'm pushing for probably not Kool-Aid. I don't think the Saints would budge on Kool-Aid, but they might. Alante is another story. And if I'm the Raiders, I'm saying I don't want a Debo, I want Alante. And so what do you do there? There's a whole conversation about Mike Thomas and whether he's the same skill set as Davante. I don't want to get into that. All I'm saying is, from a contested catch perspective, from a big-bodied wide receiver perspective, it did not work out for you last year. I don't think that Davante would be going on social media and talking trash to his quarterback, but you never know. Things happen. All right. 504 Co. This is a conversation. Says, agree, but if you go look at Taysom's college career, he's always had injuries, but agree for his age and running style. Too many touches. Kendre will help that. Yeah, I think generally speaking, we're all a lot of us are on the same page here, which is you need to find a weapon that can contribute to this offense. I think the part where we differ is the idea that it has to be from outside the building. I want to see A.T. Perry get involved. I do. I want to see A.T. Perry do the work. I want to see A.T. Perry stay healthy. And maybe that can change things for you. But for now, it is not. It is not. Now, there's like 100 comments that have come in since we started this segment. So I'm going to try to go through a few of these. The Rook 10 says Olave and Shaheed are the same guy. We need that chain mover guy. And I actually don't disagree with that. I mean, I don't think that Olave and Shaheed are the same guy, but I do think they overlap in a lot of ways that makes their skill set a little redundant next to each other. Now, Olave cannot take the top off like Rashid, and Shaheed cannot run routes like Olave. He cannot snap off a route over the middle of the field. He has a tendency to round off his routes a little bit too much. But that said, I understand what you're saying in that you don't have that kind of big body chain mover guy. I thought maybe Cedric Wilson could be that. So far, he has 1 catch for 4 yards. So I agree that you need a guy to be the chain mover guy. But yeah, I understand what you're saying there. 504 Crow says no wide receiver on our roster scares anybody outside of Shaheed and Olave. It's probably true. It's probably true. Rody City says tight ends have to block, and that's why you have not been seeing them get out for any type of receiving production. And here's the thing. I understand why you're saying that. I understand the idea. I understand that you're having to have your tight ends be a lot more involved close to the line of scrimmage. You're having to have them chip. You're having to have them do whatever. Find a way. Find a way to get Jawan Johnson involved as a pass catcher. I believe in you, Clint. You can do it. There's no excuse. I get it. The blocking, whatever. I'm not asking you to have him run routes 60% of the time. I'm asking you to have him run routes 30% of the time and have plays designed to get him the ball. And right now, I just don't see that. So we'll see. Either way, let's move on. The best blocker and catching tight end is Hill. See, that's the thing. You haven't used Taysom Hill in the receiving game either. Taysom Hill has 1 catch as a receiver this year. So and he obviously was targeted down the field against the Panthers. It was week 1 where he kind of went up and had that ball knocked away. But, I mean, you have not targeted him in the receiving game either. None of your tight ends. After week 1, where you had the 2 touchdowns for Foster and Juwan, since week 1, you have not had the tight ends involved as pass catchers at all. And I just think that has to change. I do. I think you have to find ways to get more production out of that position. Don't mind me. I'm just gonna. Y'all are fighting with each other. Y'all being so mean. KD says, what's the point of a Lambo if you have 0 gas? That's a good one. Now, I don't know. I think it would be more like tires, because the gas analogy, it's like the Maserati in the trailer park meme, right? It's not about, you can go buy gas. I would buy, if I got a good deal on a Lamborghini with no gas in it, I would still buy the Lamborghini. And then I would figure out how to go get gas and put the gas in it, right? Now, if it had no tires or engine, then that would be a problem, right? If I had nowhere to park it, but somewhere on the street where it's going to get broken into and stolen, then that's a problem. So, I agree with what you're saying. I think the analogy needs some work, because yes, you're talking about it's the Maserati in the trailer park meme, which I'm pretty sure is the meme that got Jalen Reagor cut because he posted it on Instagram. And then he got cut 3 days later from the Patriots practice squad. So I don't know. I don't want Davante feeling like a Maserati in a trailer park. Ron Bowles says, get Adams, no brainer. I'm trying to get some new folks in here who don't comment a lot, but I do want to get them, make them feel like they were heard. Don says, if the Saints make the trade, they have to keep him for at least 5 years and be competitive. That's the thing. Yeah. If you make this trade, you better go win. You better go win. You better not make this trade and miss the playoffs for a 4th consecutive year, because then you just look dumb. Then you just look like you have no clue. Then it just looks like a dog chasing cars. And then you caught the car and you're like, what do I do now? I'm sitting in the front seat with my paws on the steering wheel and I have no idea how to drive a stick shift. That's the reason a dog can't drive a car, because of the transmission. All right. Let's get at least one more comment in here that isn't y'all being mean to each other. Jay Black says, I just got here. Hola. Nice to see you. I know I can find one more that isn't y'all being mean to each other. I know I can. I have faith in me. Katie says, man, I'm very high in our DB room and don't want to trade anyone away for real. Takes one injury here or there for our deepest room to become our most depth-stricken one. And yes, this is true. And here's the thing. If you trade a Debo, everyone's like, well, we have a guy to replace him. Yes, until one guy gets hurt. And then you're talking about, are we starting Rico Payton on the outside? So what's going to end up happening is if you trade a Debo, you're going to go into next year's draft and everyone's going to be like, I want this running back in the second round. I want this. I want that. And they're like, actually, we're going to take a cornerback. And everyone's like, why? We already have 3. And yeah, so I agree with that. I agree with that. Like, it's everyone, you feel like, well, this is our position with depth. So why don't we trade now and we will never, ever regret it. And I guarantee you will. At some point in this season, you will be down 1 or 2 starting corners and you were going to have to do something. And as good as Davante Adams is, if the issue right now, like think about what the issue was over the last 2 games. The issue wasn't going down late in the game and going to get a lead. The issue was, what do you do once you get that lead? and in back-to-back games, it was, man, we are down a couple pieces in the secondary or on the defense, and they can't get that stop. And I don't care how many guys you have on offense, they're not going to help you get that stop. So does losing a Debo make it more difficult for that to happen? I don't know. Obviously, he was the GOAT of that game in terms of the pass interference, but he's still your best option at outside corner. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there. Yeah. Katie says, hindsight is 2020. It worked with CJ, GJ, but always didn't pan out like you like. Yeah, and we're gonna see. But all right, I think we got through a lot there. That was a long segment. We'll see. This is going to be a situation that keeps developing. I don't see it coming to a resolution anytime that quickly. Again, if I'm the Saints and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, if I can make this trade, when would I be hopeful that Davante Adams could positively impact his team? I would guess week 8. Just because of the scheduling you have coming up, even if you brought him in, which you're not, I doubt you'd bring him in this week. You bring him in next week, and he probably isn't going to even be active for that first game. Could he be active on that Thursday? I don't know, but at least he gave us something to talk about. I do have to appreciate Davante for timing it this way, because otherwise this would have been a very, very difficult pod to fill with content. And instead, we've had nothing but comments and conversations this entire time. So thanks, Davante. Even if you don't end up here, you helped me create a podcast, and that is what I want. One more question, Rose City D heard, and this is not about Davante. It's one of there's like 140 comments in there. I would guess 3 did not have to do anything with Davante, so I do want to mention this. So don't know the extent of Willie Gay's injury/surgery, but can't he play with the club like Lattimore did years ago? I saw some people commenting on this, and they would tweet the picture of Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, who were playing next to each other for the 49ers. Both of them had clubs on their hands. And now I will tell you, during the game, he went out. I was told he was questionable. Then I was told he was probable. And then I was told he was out. So I would imagine they went and they got x-rays done. They got some imaging done. And they were like, he can't play with this. Now, yes, theoretically, you could go cast something up and try to play through that. And that's going to be the question for this week and beyond, is now that they have sorted that out, can he safely play with a club or whatever on that hand, which is something we've seen guys do. I think it depends on the extent of the injury. And if there's a break or whatever it was and impact will further damage that, then you probably wouldn't. But I think Willie Gay's a tough guy, and I would imagine he'll be pushing to play with the club. So we'll see. I don't expect to see him out there at practice on Thursday. And I don't expect Dennis to give us much information as to the extent of that injury. He's just not going to do it. But we'll have to kind of wait and see if he's going to play. I imagine you'll probably want to get him out to practice at least one of those 3 days. And I imagine he would be wearing whatever type of cast or club in practice that he would be wearing in the game to try to get used to it. So I don't know for sure. But I do think it's possible that he continues to play. And it's just like there was some jokes like, oh, why could they do this and not him? I think there's a difference between clubbing a hand that's broken and playing with it the next week, the week after, as opposed to you got hurt in a game and you need surgery of some kind, some sort of medical intervention, and you're back on the field 10 minutes later just dealing with that. First of all, it probably would hurt significantly. And second, but that was one of the more frustrating injuries for me in that game, and one of the more frustrating injuries for me this season, because I was excited to see what Willie could do. And instead we got like one play. And anyway, but all right. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Thanks for everyone who dropped in a comment, hot take, sniping at each other about this or that or whatever, this and the other thing. We'll have to see what happens in this Davante Adams saga. It's going to be fun to watch. I'm going to enjoy going through it. I'm going to enjoy hearing a lot of the takes coming from around the ether, particularly if he ends up somewhere else and you can't get it done. But either way, who dat, subscribe. Thanks, y'all. Be easy. We'll be back on Friday with a preview episode. We're going to get someone from Chiefs country in here to give us the lowdown on what's going on with Kansas City. We're going to talk X factors. I promise Steve will be around. And that episode's also going to include the initial injury report. So a lot of that episode outside of the Chiefs stuff will be catching up on where exactly the Saints are. We're only going to be able to get one injury report in before that episode. So it'll be limited. Either way, who dat? Go Saints. Be easy, y'all. Peace.